Panic disorder passenger. In today's video, I would like to talk about a subject that related to panic attacking, panic disorders, and this is the traveling. Because most people, myself included, I had panic attack most of the time when I had a fearful traveling. For example, I had terrible panic attacks and I had terrible panic anticipations before flights, and I had panic attacks on the flights, during the flight, mostly take off, and at the beginning I had at the landing too, and the flight was just not something I enjoyed though. However, I remember very well in my childhood I loved flying, and I just couldn't wait until the flight day had come, and I really like it. But during the 15 years of panic disorder period in my life, which I had already, and I am okay now. I don't have panic disorders more than 1 year, and when I'm on the flight, I have no longer any panic attack, thank God. And thanks to me that I had a chance, a God-given chance to get rid of the panic disorder. So on the flights, it was always terrible. I remember at most of the takeoff was very fearful. I was anticipating, my heart palpitations increased. I was shortage of breath. I was moving my body during the on the runway and just right before the takeoff, and it was very stressful for me. I had so intense fear that probably the whole plane passengers was laughing on me. At least I thought. Obviously, nobody took any look. At least I couldn't. My mind just I can't remember any, but I did. But I did awful lot of times, and all the time it was awful. And just back to that example which I started regarding of flight and being a panic disorder passenger on a flight. I had terrible fighting just right before the flight. I was okay 2, 3 days before the flight, but in the very last 2 days, for example, or the last day before the flight, everything started just rising a little bit at the beginning, and then as I had, for example, 24 hours before the flight, my fear intensity just started rising up really intensely. And when I was on airplane and the plane taxied to the runway and then stopped and started preparing for takeoff, my fear just got so doubled, tenth, whatever. So I had the most terrible fear during that takeoffs, and it happened so many times because I'm living in abroad, and I'm traveling home relatively often. So and therefore this anticipation before the flight of fear, I focused to that takeoff so much that I had terrible fight against myself that I shouldn't go, I just avoid going, but I had to go. So I was fighting with myself. Also, it was terrible because despite I mean, you could just live your life. You could just be aligned with yourself, and you can be productive, and you can grow your life, and you can just stick to your plans, what you'd like to do, what you'd like to achieve, Instead of all of this, I did nothing but worrying about little tiny ridiculous plans like, oh, I'll put my bottom on a chair on a flight, and then most likely I will have a panic attack, at least at the takeoff. And this always happened. It always, without any exception, it always happened. The more anticipation, the more fear focus I invested in before the flight, the heavier my panic attack it was during the takeoff. Every time. Well, I had other transportation in London. I'm living in London, and then many times when I had to go by bus somewhere, and for example, when I had just one second, let me just tell you that I had a fear. My panic attack is based on my panic disorder based on that I thought my heart could stop at any moment. And this was so terrifying to me that literally during panic attacks throughout my panic disorder period of 15 years, I was so many times paralyzed because of this. I can't for I um, once I remember that I was traveling on a bus 137. I was towards going home, and then I had to ask the driver to stop the bus because I had a very intense panic attack. I thought I wanted to die, and probably the driver had. I mean, for the driver, perhaps myself was not his first occasion, and he was kind of a little bit of laughing on me, and then still he went till the very next stop, and I jumped off from the bus at the stop, and then the usual thing. Nothing has happened, obviously, because a panic attack is basically nothing. It's a fear. It's a fear of fear. Also, one of my most terrible panic attack occurrences happened during the 15 years of panic disorder period in my life. On the underground, I remember the Baker Street. Baker Street on the underground, approaching it, that was one of the most, it's it's ridiculous, I know. It was the most fearful thing in my life, perhaps. Baker Street. It's after Baker Street, it is too far the very next station. If something happening with my heart, I couldn't get any help, I'm just gonna die. At least this was my thought, and this has just paralyzed me, and many times took me having a position, took me and having a terrible panic attacks I had. So traveling wasn't pleasant for me at all, but still, and I avoided many occasions to travel, and I also many times did not avoid, and that was all the occasion when I had panic attacks. Good news is that I have no longer any panic attack because I successfully managed to live now without panic attack. If you'd like to ask me how did I do that, I'm more than happy to advise you. Please feel free to ask any question, comment this video if you'd like so, and see you next time.